We are Rogue Media Sports.
Having a teen feels like having your own live-in influencer. Somehow you know the latest makeup trend and the fact that skinny jeans are not the most flattering pants. Now it's time for you to show them what's up, thanks to Domino's. From April 22nd through April 28th, carry out as many large two-topping pizzas from Domino's as you want for only $6.99 each. And teach your kiddo that saving money and Domino's pizza will never go out of style. Carry out only. You must ask for this limited time offer. Valid 4/22 through 4/28. Tax may apply. Prices, participation, and charges may vary.
With the Wells Fargo Active Cash Credit Card, you can earn unlimited 2% cash rewards on purchases you want and purchases you need. That means you earn 2% cash rewards on what you want, like season tickets to watch your favorite team, and 2% cash rewards on what you need, like paying for parking. That's the beauty of the Active Cash Credit Card. It's ready when you are, with unlimited 2% cash rewards. The Wells Fargo Active Cash Credit Card. That's real life ready. Terms apply. Learn more at wellsfargo.com/activecash.
And it is time for another Doomsday podcast, the podcast heard around the world, the number one Cowboys podcast in the country in terms of critical acclaim. And Ed Werder joining me from somewhere in the mountains of Colorado, where he's been celebrating family Christmas. And I know with his little grandson, little Henry, had a big one, and certainly getting to an age where he can really, really appreciate everything. And then Frito, of course, from Frito Nation Productions, coming to you. I'm in Tulsa, guys. I've been moving around the country a little bit. I am now located in Tulsa. I was in Italy, have flown back from Rome, now have ended up in Tulsa, really similar places. But good to be back with you. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, all those things. Ed, did you was Christmas good to you? Did you get anything interesting?
No, I didn't really get anything interesting because Jill and I decided rather than our usual Neiman Marcus spending spree for the holidays, making sure those good people are kept in business. The Dallas institution, as you well know, we opted to, given my current employment status and funds rapidly running out, we mutually agreed to invest in a piece of art for our Colorado house. So that's what we're going to get, but it's not finished yet. So we have nothing at the time. Kind of like the Cowboys, sitting here with a big, giant holiday bag of nothing.
I think that's most folks in this country, when they fall on hard times, go out and get something for their art collection. So, Ed, I just want to say,
Charlotte Jones, the value of art at Jerry World. I mean, it's incredible. I'd like to try to compete with that someday.
Oh man, I'd love that. NBC and everybody who comes in to cover would talk about the Werder art collection. It is, by the way, just a sort of a crushing end to the Cowboys season. It's funny they have to play one more game, Ed. This feels completely over. I know you've had to cover teams that are in this situation before. I do want to say there are a few days left, and thank you, D&M Leasing, for being such a big part of the Doomsday podcast. I mean, Ed, when they came on board with us, the Cowboys the season was spiraling out of control, and they said, "Hey, we like these guys and want to be a part of them." So I'm very appreciative. I know you are, and due to the huge popularity of the November sale, D&M Leasing extending the sale through the end of the year. That means you still have some time to get a great deal on a new car for Christmas. In fact, reach out to me, DM me, however it is you could just tweet at me, and I'll help make this. I'll help make this happen. With D&M's Easy Lease, you can get a great Christmas gift and not make a payment until February. You'll also save up to 50% a month versus buying, and have no early termination fees. It sells the biggest savings offer in all of D&M's 35 years of business, with great deals on 2017 closeouts and lower interest rates. You don't want to miss out. Call D&M Leasing today at any local area code in 35 Lease. It's 35 LEASE, or visit dmautoleasing.com. Again, it's any local area code 35 Lease. It's 35 LEASE, or visit dmautoleasing.com. Call is free. Not calling will cost you
Yeah, you know what?
Thousands.
One thing I'd like to say about our partnership with D&M Leasing, and you asked about my holiday experience. You know that really annoying commercial that we've seen 1.5 million times now, where that guy evolves as a young boy, always checking out the window on his way to check his gifts under the tree and hoping
Correct.
there's a car out in his driveway. Well, because of your partnership with them and influence with D&M Auto Leasing, I've kind of been doing that. I've been living that, going to the window occasionally to see if there's a new car parked out front from you with a big bow on top. And as of yet, that's not been a positive result.
I think we're headed that direction. I really do. But for now, you're going to have to make do with some razors that I'm sending you guys. We'll be talking more about them. Frito, a lot's happening on the Cowboys landscape, even as we record this on Tuesday morning, the day after Christmas. Please play the music. There it is. The soulful tones of Ronnie Foss, and people have been asking, Ed, I've noticed on Twitter, who is that guy? Where can I find that song? And we will always be able to point you in the right direction on that. Ed, we'll get right to it. And we've got a lot of aftermath and fallout to talk about on Sunday's game. The Christmas Eve game, everything was set up for the Cowboys. Everything had gone their way previous to the start. It was all out there in front of them. And in fact, for much of the first half, like a lot of this season, there was some dominance shown at the line of scrimmage. And it was going their way. And it all comes to an end, though, in a crushing 21-12 loss to the Seattle Seahawks. And Ed, this was one that I don't know where this team was going to go. I don't know if they were going to sneak in or not, but they went ahead and took out all suspense, especially with what was going on in that second half.
Well, I think this game will forever be known as the Christmas Eve debacle. It was a legitimate, by definition, must-win situation that determined whether the Cowboys or the Seahawks remained in playoff contention. The Cowboys had Ezekiel Elliott, their star running back, had returned to the lineup following a 6-game suspension, and yet the Cowboys failed to score a touchdown against an injured Seahawks defense that had allowed 72 points in the previous 2 games. The Cowboys are home. The Seahawks are without Richard Sherman and Cam Chancellor. It was a bad and somewhat incomprehensible result. I mean, I think it's one thing to lose to the singular brilliance of a player like Russell Wilson, but that's not what happened. This was football suicide. 3 turnovers, the quarterback and the $13 million receiver unable to connect. The offensive coordinator doesn't give his best player, Elliott, the ball at the opponent 2 or 3 yard line with the game still in, kind of hanging in the balance there. And that's going to lead to all kinds of questions, as Jason Garrett has now led the Cowboys into 4 elimination games during his coaching career in Dallas, 7 coaching seasons, and they've lost all 4 of those win or you're out scenarios. And they've never advanced beyond the divisional round of the playoffs. And so, what does Jerry Jones want from his coaching staff? Does he want a team that's going to contend every year for a Super Bowl? Or is he going to settle for what he has now? They've made the playoffs twice in 7 seasons with Garrett as a head coach. They've never gotten beyond the divisional round, as I said. And if your goal is winning the Super Bowl, it seems you've proven that that's never going to happen. He's failed with a 12-win season that he got from Tony Romo and DeMarco Murray, and now a 13-win season that he had last year with Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah, it's truly the way it's happened. And what you said, 4 of the, he's closing in on a possibility. We'll see. Philly has nothing to play for, and they'll rest a lot of their starters. But, you could have 4 500 seasons, which is just this coach right now, Ed, it just looks like the picture of mediocrity. Now, you hit on it really quickly. Let's dial down on something that happened, and we'll decide if it could lead to the end of this specific coach's time in Dallas, and we'll talk about who we think the head coach is going to be safe. But you mentioned the timing of in the second half, there are the Cowboys with a chance to jump right back into things, and they're sitting down there midway through the fourth quarter, knocking on the door, and within the 5-yard line. In fact, it was first and goal from the 3-yard line, and on that first down, they went with a run-pass option. Zeke ends up keeping it for a 1-yard carry. Second and goal. Dak does. Second goal from the 2-yard line, and Dak, just a straight-up pass play. He darts out to the right, and and certainly nothing good happens. There's a hold call, but you get down there, and you've had a running back who in the first half had, what did he have, Ed, at the half? I mean, it was. He
had like 71 yards.
I think he had 71 yards and was busting through. It didn't have long carries, but he was able to get, positive yards. And you have one of the greatest, one of the most superb backs in the NFL. And you get down there and you do that whole thing. And it was painful. And it was another time where the Cowboys just seemed to overthink things. And Ed, I mean, the head coach, you can blame Scott Linehan, and I think there were very questionable play calls, but the head coach still has something on his head that indicates that he could overrule anything that's called. And so I thought after the game, in fact, there was a little back and forth that went on. I believe it was Kalishaw and Jason, and he sort of, his refusal to sort of admit, it's like, well, it's easy to look back and say that was the wrong,
right,
those were the wrong calls.
Second guess when everybody in the stadium was chanting for Zeke to get the ball at the time the play was being sent in.
Yeah.
The only people who didn't know Zeke should get the ball in that situation apparently were the 3 or 4 guys deciding whether he would.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's unbelievable that the Zeke chance, had started, and then the Cowboys weren't able to, react to that. And I mean, it was a really bad scene all the way around out there. And I really think, Ed, what we also saw the offensive tackle, the left tackle, the All-Pro and Pro Bowl left tackle Tyron Smith leave that game after one series. One thing, and we'll talk more about Jerry, but one thing Jerry did mention today was, well, we got the players to do this. Ed, we were reminded once again, this is a team that has shown us that without one running back, things can go in the tank. Without one left tackle, things completely go in the tank. It wasn't as bad, obviously, as the Chaz Green outing against Atlanta, but you were certainly compromised in a big way with Byron Bell out there at left tackle. This is a roster that needs a lot of work, and I'm not convinced this owner general manager is willing to do those things that it takes to give this thing a makeover.
Well, the problem for the Cowboys is the same problem that they've had for the past 22 years, which is the last time they were in a championship game. The one consistent factor in all of this is Jerry Jones is the general manager, and that's never going to change. It doesn't matter the performance of the team. And you're right. What he effectively just said in that we have the players to do this is, hey, the general manager's in the clear on this. The general manager put together a great roster, a roster that's good enough for this coaching staff, which I'm paying a lot of money to go win championships for me, which obviously ignores the fact that they couldn't withstand the loss of Ezekiel Elliott. They couldn't withstand the loss of Tyron Smith. They couldn't withstand the absence of Sean Lee, all of which should have been easily planned for given the history of those players. And even Stephen Jones, in his guest appearance on the show 2 weeks ago, accepted fault in that regard and said, hey, we have to build a better roster if we're going to achieve the things we want to achieve. And I know that Jerry's a guy who, in all my years of covering the team, I can remember, as far back as he's been involved in the capacity that he is, that his willingness to hire the right head coaches has always been a question ever since Jimmy Johnson won 2 Super Bowls and immediately was allowed to leave the organization or forced to leave the organization. I can remember Jerry very distinctly proclaiming, because of their prominence, that the Cowboys can have the best that there is in coaches. Well, my question is, then why is that so seldom the case? Why do they never seem to have the best that there is in coaching if, as Jerry says, they can acquire it should they so choose to do so? And now he's in a situation where he's saying, I'm not going to fire Jason Garrett, who has 2 years left at a total of about $12 million. Now, what he hasn't said is that the assistant coaches are safe, and many of them, especially the position coaches, have expiring contracts and are now very vulnerable in this climate to some kind of scapegoat move by Jerry here. And I think the guy who's probably is going to be scrutinized the most is the offensive coordinator for the very reason we discussed, Scott Linehan. But I think this sets up a really interesting negotiation between the owner and the head coach. And they have not always had a great relationship, even though Garrett is perceived in the public and certainly by the national media as being something of a puppet coach, as has so often been the case for Cowboy coaches. But let's be honest here. Jerry has made life miserable for Jason Garrett at times. For example, they had an extended negotiation some time ago when Jerry ousted his own head coach as the offensive play caller and promoted Bill Callahan, the offensive line coach.
Correct.
That's actually what ultimately led to Jason hiring Linehan, who's a trusted offensive coach with whom he has a long history. Jerry forced, on the recommendation of Barry Switzer and Larry Lacewell, for Garrett to take Monty Kiffin as his defensive coordinator, and Garrett didn't quit over it. And then there was the epic one was where Jerry was prepared to force Garrett to fire his own brother as an assistant, John, as a tight ends coach. Ultimately, he left the organization of his own volition, or so it seemed. And so I think that's where this is going to get interesting this offseason. To what extent is Jason Garrett going to be willing to fight for Scott Linehan?
Well, I'm glad you said all that, and I think there's some other people on the staff who we don't always think about in other positions. Sometimes, whether it's scapegoating, whether it's deserved or whatever, people are sort of thrown overboard almost to send a message. We've seen wide receivers coaches in the past. We saw Brian Stewart, who was more of a figurehead defensive coordinator. Wade Phillips has certainly taken over or retaken the play calling that year, and that was after I believe that was the 44-6 game, the infamous game in Philly. And right after that, I believe that was Brian Stewart's swan song. But he had already basically been stripped of his play calling duties during the season. So you're right, and you bring up a great point. At some point, and you don't want to say, does Jason have any dignity? But it's sort of like, okay, how much can he take? How much can he personally take? Now, it's interesting. One thing I've heard time and time again, they said where Jason has history and where his dad used to be. I have heard people mention, would Garrett ever consider going to be the head coach at Cleveland? And you would think, oh, what a horrible franchise. And I think you'd be right in saying that, although it is a franchise that's going to have a ton of first-round picks. And, they already have a lot of first-round picks and everything. I just wonder, to your point, would Jason ever become – it's like getting your girlfriend to break up with you instead of you having to do it. Is that what Jerry's doing? Is Jerry trying to push him so far that he will finally walk away? And is basically there anything – Ed, you mentioned one scenario. If you will basically allow your own brother, and we know the Garrett family on several levels. He has one brother that's in the scouting department.
Judd.
If you allow your own brother and to basically be fired, or they found him another job, whatever, however you want to put that, then maybe there's nothing that will cause you to walk away. And
I think the perception of Jason Garrett as to that point is that he values being the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys more than he does having the power necessary to do the job effectively and win, because he isn't willing ultimately to tell Jerry that that's not acceptable and I'm done here if you force that change on me. So far, that's not occurred, and I can't imagine that he's going to walk away from $12 million now.
Yeah, and Jerry's tried the whole thing, bringing in, first with Jimmy, obviously back in the day, but bringing in a powerful head coach who had a lot of decision-making power, and he did that with Parcells. Now, he's jokingly and maybe somewhat seriously talked about, well, we did that to get this stadium built. But, it's just the names that might pop up in relation to, who would come in. I mean, Gruden's name is big right now because there is some thought that he might be in play at Tampa Bay. Gruden is someone that Jerry has a really good relationship with. But now he's not going to come into a situation and sit around and be pushed around by an owner general manager. And that's probably why it wouldn't work here.
And Jerry's always had an aversion to paying big money to head coaches. He just does not. Part of his philosophy. He doesn't think with the profile and the magnitude of the Cowboys that's necessary, and he's not comfortable doing that. He's paying. He signed Garrett. Garrett was here for 5 years before he got a big contract, 5 years and $30 million. That's $6 million a year, which probably puts him in the top 10. But it's not what it's going to cost to get John Gruden or maybe the best coordinator candidate, a guy like Josh McDaniels out of New England, is going to be substantially higher price than those two people than Jason Garrett's making now. Plus, he would have to pay all the Jason Garrett's money off. He'd have to pay both coordinators, Rod Marinelli and Scott Linehan, off, and he just signed them last year. Plus any other assistant with a contract, and then replace all of those people. So you're asking him to pay double or more what he's paying his coaching staff now, and I just can't see Jerry doing that. And all of his quotes at the moment are that he is not considering a coaching change. He doesn't think that firing Jason Garrett is in the best interest of the organization. He simply has not addressed any potential staff changes. And I think once we get past the point of talking about this, I think the other big consideration that has to take place this offseason all of a sudden, and one that's probably the most unexpected, at least to me, is Dak Prescott your franchise quarterback?
Yeah, I hate to even have to address it because you and I both think the world of him, and he's been on this Doomsday podcast with us. Especially, anytime you get involved in those high-end jewelry stores, that's when we have a chance to sit down with Dak. That's a tough thing. That's a tough thing, and Dak's going to have an interesting off season because whether you want to try to write this off to a sophomore slump, we have seen quarterbacks come onto the scene, become stars in this league, get enormous contracts, and then fade.
He hasn't gotten.
No, he hasn't. The Cowboys will have to decide on that. Now, Kaepernick comes to mind as someone who just, just took the league by storm and became considered one of the great quarterbacks. RG3 briefly, Cap did it for a little bit longer, obviously, and had more success than he did. But these things can fade, and we saw what can happen without Zeke. And the scary thing is, with Zeke, things didn't improve that much against the Seattle team. Yeah. And Ed, we should remind everybody, in case there's any misunderstanding, this was not your usual Legion of Boom group that was out there. In fact, I could not help. Did you do the same thing? I mean, I know your favorite player. I say that half jokingly, that he loves you, the cornerback for Seattle Seahawks, Richard Sherman is out for the rest of the season. Did you not? I kept seeing
Cam Chancellor, the big physical, intimidating safety.
Yeah, there was some young player for them who actually played pretty well. He was coming on the blitz, and he had those dreads. And I kept saying, I thought Sherman's out for some reason. I was just
if
like,
you're a corner for the Seahawks, you must have dreads, even if you have to go to the shop and have them sewn into your head because they look so damn good hanging out on the helmet.
It is a great look. But listen, they played in speaking of the quarterback, and I think you're right. I think the Cowboys are going to have now. I think this is what Jerry's going to do this offseason. Jerry is going to almost will this Dak thing back into place. Jerry has already compared his study habits and the things he does in the offseason to Peyton Manning, just the things he does from week to week, prepare his preparation. So I think Jerry will. You talk about circling the wagons. you will hear an owner general manager get behind Dak Prescott like you've never heard before. But your point's a good one, Ed, in the fact that they're going to be do you realize how many quarterbacks are going to go in the first round this year?
Do you know how many quarterbacks, veteran free agent quarterbacks who may be available? I mean,
correct.
Breeze may finish his contract with the Saints. Kirk Cousins might be available.
Yeah.
They obviously already missed on an opportunity to bring in Jimmy Garoppolo if they had wanted to trade a second-round pick for a quarterback. So I think you're right. I think they've already committed to Dak Prescott, and I've always believed until very recently that was without question the right thing to do. But now I think the whole thing has to be reevaluated. I mean, you look at what this team did this season. This is a team that, based on draft pick allocation, draft on percentage of salary cap devoted to players, they're committed to winning on offense. And if you look at what's happened, Dak Prescott in this elimination game at home against Seattle, 21 for 34, 182 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions.
Yeah.
This is a guy who, we lauded as a risk-adverse quarterback, didn't throw interceptions, 4 as a rookie, incredible. But now he's tripled that total, and he leads the league in turnovers returned for touchdowns this year. And then Zeke Elliott, the centerpiece of the entire franchise, missed 6 games serving a suspension. The Cowboys go 3-3. Can you really trust this guy in this high-profile, important role? And then Dez Bryant, $13 million receiver, leads the team with 12 drops, has 2 touchdowns, no 100-yard games. I mean, none of these 3 guys met expectations this year.
Yeah, and boy, the last one, Dez had a game the other day, made the one really nice play, also a nice play by Dak, and that what reminds you every once in a while when you see Dak get outside the pocket and make one of those plays down the field. Dez came back on that ball, but for the most part, Dez had drops, had one glance off his hands. I mean, it was a poor throw; it was behind him, but still, it hit him in the hands, and that one went for just a back-breaking interception. Was that KJ Wright? Who had that interception, and I just feel like this fan base, by the way, they're ready for Dez to be traded or released. Again, I don't think that'll happen. I mean, you just have to look at that contract situation and then what it would do to the cap to just flat out release him. But so I don't think it's going to happen, but it points to a wider situation.
I wouldn't rule it out myself. I think they can save so much money. I think they have all kinds of leverage to use against him to either accept a lower salary or take his release and go out on the open market where clearly his statistics do not justify his salary. And, I thought there were some really revealing comments made by Dak Prescott after the game that were very critical of Dez Bryant, who's been somebody who's really stood up for Dak Prescott early in his career when the transition was underway from Tony Romo to Dak Prescott, and a player whose opportunities have probably suffered for this quarterback change because, let's be honest, as much as I like Prescott, he's at this point nowhere near the pocket passer that Tony Romo is. But after that interception and after the game the other day, he said, hey, the second one, I have to throw him a better ball. Just put it right there on his face mask and then don't give him a chance to drop it, I guess. I mean, that is seething criticism of Dez Bryant.
I thought, Ed, that was one of the great passive-aggressive quarterback comments of all time. I mean, that was a moment. This quarterback, we've seen him sign balls and talk to us. He's pretty buttoned up. I mean, doesn't always let down his guard. That was a moment right there where it was kind of like, the one way I can do this and us not get burned is to be perfect, is basically what he was saying, because my wide receiver's not going to help me. And I thought that was that was an interesting comment on his part. And Ed, it sets up, and we're going to have time to talk in this offseason. Draft's right here, by the way. Draft's going to be out at AT&T Stadium. There is some thought now, would the Cowboys, where they end up drafting, look at a receiver in the first round? And that, boy, you talk about sending a signal to Dez Bryant in every possible way. That's just much cheaper to go that route than to try to go get somebody in free agency. And you brought up something that is interesting to me. What would he get on the open market? What would Dennis Bryant? Now, are there still people out there that would want to, that he would be appealing to? Sure. But you're right. I think the most he could possibly get, and I'd have to look at it. I don't have it in front of me. But, what Brandon Marshall got in with the Giants.
Moving to the Giants.
That's about, and quite honestly, going into that offseason, I think Dez was thought of as a better overall wide receiver, a little bit younger than Brandon Marshall. But I think, honestly, when you look at what Brandon Marshall ended up getting with the Giants, that might be about the top side for what Dez could expect.
Well, I know from the Cowboys' point of view that I think they unexpectedly find themselves in a position that the Rams were in, the Eagles were in, that the Patriots proved to be in going into last offseason, which is I've got, in the case of the Eagles and the Rams, I've got this young second-year quarterback, and I just don't have enough talent around him to allow him the opportunity to succeed to the extent I think it's possible given his skill set. And so the Rams, they go out and acquire Sammy Watkins and another, starting caliber receiver. And the Eagles go out and get Alshon Jeffrey and Torrey Smith, and they significantly improve Carson Wentz's opportunities to win. And even the Patriots with Tom Brady, a 5-time Super Bowl champion, do they just say, well, he can make anybody great? No, they go trade for Brandon Cooks. They trade for Philip Dorsett. And look at what that team's done. So I think the point that this makes is general managers around the NFL, Matt, when you talk to them, as you know, they'll say that receiver is really the position where it's easiest to acquire high-end players, whether through the draft or free agency. If you need receivers, that's a position that you can get multiple players who can impact your roster in a positive way in a single offseason. And so I think that's kind of the position the Cowboys are in. I think they may have been wrong about their evaluation of Dak Prescott. That remains to be seen, and I would certainly support giving him another season before deciding he can't do it and looking for the next guy. Although I wouldn't be adverse to taking a quarterback in this draft if the right guy was at the right position for me, just to safeguard that position. And I don't think it's bad to have two good players on the roster, one guy 2 years further into his contract than the other guy, or his NFL career than the other guy. And I think that they're in a position where they've got to go out and make this team better around the quarterback on offense, and that they didn't really think that was necessary based on what they did this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, to have arguably one of the top offensive lines in the league, to have, I don't even know if it's that big of an argument, to have the best back in the league, and that's what Dak Prescott has around him, and then not be able to get it done. It's pretty disappointing. And
we also need to remember that. I think if you're gonna blame people for this team's failure, as you look at it on a broad perspective, that belongs to Jerry Jones, who was an unrelenting in the distractions that he created for his football team, which is not by any means out of the ordinary given the way he operates, and Ezekiel Elliott for his offseason conduct, for fighting the suspension as long as he did, for then serving the suspension and putting the team in a position where simply had built so much around him and was so dependent on his unique generational talent that they couldn't overcome it, that they turned immediately into a 500 or worse team. So if you're going to blame two people and only two people, that's where I would point my fingers.
All right. And Ed, I want to, and I think that's very logical to start right there. Now, I think Jerry's going to get so caught up in hosting the draft that he'll turn the page on this thing in a hurry. And I wanted to read you a couple of these comments that Jerry had on his radio show today over on the Fan. And here's one thing he said when defending, talking about not making a head coaching change. And let's read between the lines of what we think Jerry, as longtime Jerry observers, what exactly he's getting at here. I know a lot about our coaching staff. I certainly know a lot about Jason Garrett. Because of that, I can very quickly and candidly say his job is not an issue here at all. Now, Ed, as I read that and think about it, it's what Jerry is seeming to insinuate and basically just say outright is that you guys out there, the fans and media and everybody, don't have as much information as I have on this head coach. You don't have the insider knowledge that I have. And now, reading between the lines there, I would say Jerry's basically saying this, I have someone who literally will has been there with me. I've known him for years and allows me to be me. I think that's part of it. And basically it's when, I think the working relationship and the setup of all this is to your point from earlier, is almost more important. And Jerry can talk about Super Bowls and how important that is, but really, Jerry does not want to sacrifice comfort, and he has a certain level of comfort with this head coach, and he would rather try to lose it this way to win it with something that makes him completely uncomfortable.
Well, we know Jerry's very intractable in many situations and circumstances, and this seems to be the primary one that's an issue for Jerry. Jerry wants to be comfortable, as you said, and Jason certainly has provided him that. I think Wade Phillips did too. That's why he chose Wade Phillips over Norv Turner when he had the opportunity to choose between the two as a head coach, and he was then going to groom Jason Garrett. I mean, he's thought of Jason Garrett as his Tom Landry, as he has told us in the past. And Tom Landry wouldn't have been Tom Landry had he not been given some real latitude early on when the team struggled. But, at this point in the modern NFL, I think you pretty much know what a guy is, or decisions are certainly made more quickly on whether a guy is capable of succeeding or he's not. Jerry, for whatever reason, has decided that Jason can succeed and that this relationship between the owner and the general manager is exactly what he wants, and that he covets that more than looking at the results over 7 years and saying, hey, the guy's not a consistent winner. The guy's never, no matter the talent he's had, never gotten us even to a conference championship game, yet I somehow can see him eventually winning a Super Bowl with this franchise.
Yeah.
I think most people would say that's far-fetched, but the opinions of most don't matter. What matters is Jerry and the opinion of those who are in close proximity, his inner circle, the Will McClays, the Stephen Joneses, who can influence Jerry's decisions. And maybe they'll undertake a mission to change his view over time, slowly. That's what they did with Terrell Owens some years ago. Jerry was insistent that Owens was going to return to the team, despite creating toxic chemistry in the locker room and players wanting him out, and Stephen Jones appreciating the value of team chemistry and recognizing the threat to that Owens was. And over, a period of a couple months, Stephen kept bringing people to Jerry who believed what Stephen did, and ultimately that opinion prevailed, and Jerry reluctantly let Owens go. Could that sort of thing take place here, a metamorphosis from where Jerry is supporting publicly Jason Garrett's future as a head coach and ultimately decides to make a change? I wouldn't completely rule it out, but when Jerry's this public and his stance is this firm, my sense is that he's pretty committed to this position at this point.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And it's a good time to be mediocre because back in the day, Jerry was still so connected to those Super Bowls and he'll tell you to this day, one of his biggest regrets was giving up so quickly on Chan Gailey. And there's a coach that was fired pretty quickly for a mediocre type season.
And the audacity of standing up to Jerry.
Yeah, correct. And Jerry had to put him in his place. So, boy, that's fascinating to me. What you said about I mean, thinking about the Terrell Owens thing, could it play out this way? Let me just throw one more thing at that. When you're trying to, decide and see who to compare all this to, I think the when you see someone have the success of a Sean McVay, I don't know how you sit here and you sort of are able to accept all this mediocrity when you watch a 31-year-old head coach show up someplace and completely take a quarterback who seemed to, under Jeff Fisher, have some real confidence issues, take a number one overall, and then things did not work well for him at all in his rookie season. And to take that team and now have them considered, one of the, has to be, I mean, they have to be one of the favorites to possibly reach a Super Bowl with Wade's defense plus that offense. How can you watch that sort of innovation and those sort of results and then keep thinking, you know what, I'd really like to stick with status quo? Now, there probably aren't a ton of McVays out there, but I'm just saying, if that doesn't grab Jerry's attention, Ed, I don't know what would.
I think because if you look around, that's sort of the exception. I mean, that's been a historic transformation, taking a Rams team that had perennially been one of the worst offensive teams in football, and in fact was dead last year, and make them the most prolific offense in a single year, win the division and give themselves a real opportunity to go to Minnesota and play in a Super Bowl. It's an astonishing accomplishment for a rookie coach. In fact, he's the youngest head coach to ever achieve that. And but it is the exception. I mean, that's not what happened with Vance Joseph in Denver. It's not what happened last year with Adam, or 2 years ago, with Adam Gase in Miami. And so that kind of thing doesn't happen all the time. And Jerry's probably, and there are going to be a lot of jobs open, so there's going to be a lot of competition for coaches. And I think, in fact, I know because I've asked people. Despite the dim view many of us ultimately have on Jason Garrett and his performance as a head coach, he probably would get another head coaching job in a short space of time in the NFL. I don't know if he'd have to sit out a year and then get a job, but I do think he would be a head coach for another organization should Jerry decide to let him go at some point. But I kind of agree with you. Like, how do you just sit here and see what's happened over 7 years? And more times than not, it's been 8-8 or worse. And there's been two exceptions. And, Jason Garrett's timing was perfect to go 12-4 with that, team that Romo led, because his contract was up and his future was being decided. And it won him a long-term deal and, somewhat big money by NFL coaching standards. And so that's where Jerry is now. But Jerry always believed in Jason Garrett, and clearly at this point, in this very moment, he still does. Whether that changes remains to be seen. But I don't know how, if you're not going to change general managers and you're not going to change head coaches, how you can really expect ultimately to dramatically influence the outcome for next season, unless somehow you get these players that we've talked about to perform at a significantly higher level. But apparently you'd be doing that in the same offensive system, for example.
Yeah, and I think that this will all come down to that. No matter what happens in the draft, and maybe they'll bring in some help. They need more help probably along the offensive line, depth issues there. They got to take a look. Tyron Smith, a guy who seems like on an annual basis now has back surgeries. He's a great player, but that's something you have to take a peek at. And then I think a linebacker. You're going to have to do something. But I think what Jerry will ultimately decide, and what will be one of the themes of the offseason, is that the whole Zeke thing. In fact, in his quotes on the radio today, he said something along the lines of, "You saw what we could be earlier this season." Now, listen, were the Cowboys just blowing away the NFL before Zeke was suspended? I seem to recall them. It's not like they got off to like the greatest start in NFL history.
Out week 2 in Denver, right? They got blown out.
Correct.
They were 5-3 when Elliott was serving his suspension. They did get on a pretty good roll there.
Sure.
Win 4 games early, or 4 games in succession, and were scoring over 28 points a game And then, everything fell apart for those 3 games when Elliott was gone. And I think one of the things that happened during that period of time is Dak lost confidence in his protection. He suffered those 8 sacks in that game against the Falcons when Tyron Smith was missing and he didn't have Elliott. And he's never been the same quarterback since, really.
Yeah.
And so, how do you create the right environment for this quarterback right now?
Yeah, I think if you were going to fire Jason Garrett, you would sit there and you would kind of look at things overall, as you've pointed out with your the 4 seasons and he's closing in on possibly a 4th 500 season in his 7 seasons. But Ed, the game you just brought up, I don't think you'd have to go too far. You'd go back to that Falcons game and what happened in that one. I think at the time I referred to it as coaching malpractice, and I think even Garrett felt really embarrassed about what happened that day. They took a young left tackle and maybe, I don't know, maybe ruined him forever.
They certainly ruined him to the point that they never were willing to play him again, even though Tyron Smith, got hurt several more times and came out of the lineup, and it was always Byron Bell who went in to replace him.
Yeah, that was an embarrassing situation, and so it looks like it'll be status quo with the head coach, although somebody will pay with their job. Ed, if you had to, you brought it up earlier. I think we both agree that if someone is in play here to be thrown overboard, Scott Linehan is the most obvious candidate. Is there any? Does that make the most sense to you? Do you think there could be any retirement / firing of Rod Marinelli, or do you think the man who should be most fearful of his job would be Linehan?
Well, I think when you reflect on the season and you think about what failures stand out to you, it's pretty much the failure we saw the other day to give Elliott the football in an obvious situation where you might have won the game. And what you referred to and we talked about earlier, the Atlanta situation, which I think that's more Jason Garrett's fault than it is Scott Linehan's, but it was an offensive incompetence that was readily apparent to everybody involved. And ultimately, Garrett could deflect that and make it the responsibility of the offensive coordinator if he so chooses. But yeah, I think Linehan is probably the guy whose job is in the most jeopardy at the moment. I think Marinelli, they played well enough on defense to win the game. They all know internally that he isn't provided the talent that the offensive side of the ball is, and he's made a potential rising star out of DeMarcus Lawrence and out of David Irving when he's been available, and they've just flipped the secondary and started getting positive results out of the young players they drafted back there and started playing right away. So I think if Marinelli wants to coach, then he in all likelihood stays. And it's the position coaches on offense like, Gary Brown and Derek Dooley and Wade Wilson, and along with Scott Linehan, who are the most in jeopardy. And I imagine that it's gonna require Garrett standing up to Jerry to keep that group in place, if that's what Garrett believes is in the best interest of the football team.
Yeah, if their best hope is for this head coach to stand up and fight for them, I do not like their chances.
Well, and I guess the other part of the equation is, if you're Jason Garrett, do you think this is the best system for the talent that you have, or is there somebody else out there who you're willing to give real authority to come in and make changes? Is that Jason Garrett? I'm not sure Garrett's going to endorse somebody else's offensive philosophy and the concepts and their play calling when that's sort of his area of expertise and he believes in his own system. So is there somebody else out there who's going to coach that part of it, call plays in a more logical and productive manner than Linehan has? There probably isn't, but they might feel like they have to make a change just to make one.
Yeah. And let me just say this playoffs we're about to observe, this is what will happen, with the Eagles and being able to pull one out last night with their defense. But obviously without Wentz, they are a much, much different team, it appears. This is not your typical number 1 seed roaring into the playoffs. And I think Jerry's going to take a long look at these playoffs and go, oh my gosh, I mean, what an opportunity, because you can say what you will on the AFC side, but there's no monster. I mean, Rams obviously have it going right now, but there's no
Quarterback
team
who's never been in the postseason.
Correct.
Minnesota's got a guy who's their third string quarterback.
Yeah.
Keenum, an NFL journeyman at quarterback. We saw the problems that Dick Foles has on offense, operating effectively, especially on third down. He's no Carson Wentz by any stretch of the imagination. And, this was a dream scenario for Jerry. If you'd have told him Green Bay wasn't going to be in it, he would have been thrilled with the chances that the Cowboys would have had under the circumstances we've just described, that it was a weakened NFC, especially at the quarterback position. And it was a great opportunity for Dallas to do something. And largely because of the Ezekiel Elliott suspension, that never materialized, and they never really, became significant challengers.
He will, just because I know how he functions, you know how too, he will, Ed, at some point, talking about Jerry, he will become convinced in these playoffs that the Cowboys would be the best team in the playoffs in the NFC. I mean, he will become completely convinced of that. I don't know if he's thinking that right now, but it will after that first weekend or for a divisional game. He'll watch that divisional game, and that will cross his mind. We would have been the best team in the NFC. Now, I don't think it'd been fair if the Wentz was still with the Eagles. I don't think anybody can say that. But with this current situation with Foles leading that team, Jerry will have that thought. And that's why, listen, he'd rather stick with the status quo and not have to pay out all these contracts. And I'm talking about the head coach mainly. He would, if he has to change a coach or two, that's one thing. But if he thinks this team's good enough to compete for a Super Bowl next year, he just has no incentive to make a huge change.
But that's delusional, because the way he should look at this is, the Philadelphia Eagles. My God, we could finish 6 games behind them this year. They're 13-2. If they beat us the last week of the season, we're 8-8, and they're 14-2. We finished 6 games behind a team that didn't finish the season with its starting quarterback, lost its left tackle early in the year, lost its playmaking linebacker in Jordan Hicks early in the year. That's our division. To win the division, that's the team now that we have to catch. We won the division the year before, and the division's changed hands every year, it seems like. But if you're realistic about this, that's the evaluation you have to. How do we catch the Eagles? This is a team that should only continue to get better based on what we've seen from Carson Wentz and his evolution as a quarterback, who's now far surpassed Dak Prescott in my mind in terms of what he's going to do in the future. But you're going to finish 6 games behind the Philadelphia Eagles and really delude yourself into thinking that, geez, we really had a shot at the Super Bowl this year. You weren't even close to winning your division.
You said it, though. No one does delusion better than Jerry Jones.
Sad, but true.
And I'll tell you what's not delusional, Ed, is that, another fine Doomsday podcast has come to a close. And even though next week's game is meaningless in most ways, most every way, I still think we ought to do another Doomsday, and we will react to it and be ready to do that. Ed, is there really anything to say about this upcoming game? I mean, will the Cowboys just go out and try to get the winning season? I mean, is there any scenario where they take a peek at some younger players? I mean, I don't see them. Right. Well, Cooper Rush, that would obviously send off all sorts of alarm bells.
So I don't think they'll do it for that very reason. But is it like, do you expose Ezekiel Elliott to a potential injury? Do you play Sean Lee in this game? Obviously, you would think, Tyron Smith's out of the game.
Correct.
I just think, the final week of the regular season, there'll probably be a lot to cover just because of the kind of organization the Cowboys are, the controversy that always seems to surround them, and Jerry enjoys all of that. He doesn't just endure it. But yeah, it's so anticlimactic around the NFL that shockingly, NBC decided not to televise a primetime Week 17 game for the first time in forever, because there's no situation where they could have been guaranteed a compelling matchup where somebody had something, on the line as far as making the playoffs. So they passed on an NFL game, which that's unthinkable.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know, is that a statement about where the NFL is? Because quite honestly, Ed, there was a time in the not so distant past where even if you couldn't have been guaranteed the game was going to, I can remember them putting a game on Sunday night where kind of the thought was, are the Colts going to go for the undefeated season or not? And Tony Dungy famously or infamously made a decision not to do that in one of those seasons. And it used to be that the NFL was such a monster that, even if you couldn't be guaranteed that, still put a game on Sunday night and watch the ratings go crazy because it's the NFL. And and now they got to do I almost tweeted about this, by the way. I don't know. I try not to get myself in trouble, but I noticed where they said, how will the NFL give the NBC a make good? And I thought, how will the NFL give ESPN a make good on these horrible Monday Night Football matchups for about the last 5 seasons?
The other part of the equation is when the NFL or when NBC decides that they're not going to televise a game Week 17. That means, that sponsorship, those commercials have already been sold. So now that they have to make good on that inventory going forward to their advertisers. So that's how little they think of the Week 17 matchups, that we'd rather not televise a game because of the production, costs we'll save. We can air something else on a holiday weekend, and we'd rather, make goods with these advertising inventory than put it on TV this week.
Wow, it's remarkable. And Ed, can I just say one more thing? And I know you thought maybe this would come as a gift. Thank you so much, D&M Leasing. It's not often a huge sponsor like that just kind of comes in and says, hey, we want to partner up with you guys. Even though this is a rough football team, we just like you and Ed and want to be part of this thing. We want to move forward with D&M Leasing. They are extending their sale through the end of the year. Ed, the end of the year is upon us. And in fact, I believe that happens this next weekend. All 5 days this week, I'm just going to be fielding calls for D&M Leasing. That means you still have time to get a great deal on a new car for Christmas. Call it what you want. Let's call it New Year's, kind of a New Year's gift at this point. With D&M Leasing's Easy Lease, you can get a great Christmas gift and not make a payment until February. You'll also save up to 50% a month versus buying and have no early termination fees. Sell is the biggest savings offer in all of D&M's 35 years of business. Great deals on 2017 closeouts and lower interest rates. You don't want to miss out. Call D&M Leasing today at any local area code in 35 Lease. It's 35 LEASE, or visit dmautoleasing.com. Again, any local area code and 35 Lease. It's 35 LEASE, or visit dmautoleasing.com. Call's free. Not calling will cost you thousands. All right, Ed, tremendous work by you. And by the way, be looking in the mail, or next time we're together, that's when you will get that Harry's razor. I know.
I'll be in studio with you next week, so just remember to put them in the car.
I will.
D&M Auto Leasing freebie, and pack that in the car for Frito and I, and we'll see you in studio next week.
Yeah, and Ed, do you want me to tell you the Harry's deal right now? Would you like to hear that?
I would like to hear it.
Harry's is so confident you're going to love their blades. They'll give you their trial set for free when you sign up at harrys.com/D&M. Doomsday. 3 million guys have switched to Harry's. Ed, you know, I've done it. You've commented. You've said, Matt, how do you get your skin so smooth? I don't recall you
about how sensitive your skin is, how thin it generally is. That's what I've commented on.
I think I am a thin-skinned man. But listen, I don't even have to get the old styptic pencil out anymore because Harry's. I love the feel of the ergonomic handle. I never used to talk about ergonomic handles until I started using Harry's. Love the feel of it and love the way it works. I want you to claim your free trial offer from Harry's today. $13 value for free when you sign up. Just cover shipping to get your free trial set. Go to harrys.com/Doomsday, Doomsday. Do it right now. That's Harry's. And again, 5 precision engineer blades, rich lathering shave gel, a travel blade cover. Ed, when you're back and forth from Colorado, to put that little travel cover on it. And then I'm telling you, you have a nice goatee about this time of year.
But you want to keep it sharp.
You've got to keep that thing
stand
sharp.
out. You got to keep everything down around it to keep it sharp, and it's a standout item for me. And I may have some prolonged assignments in the weeks to come. So more about that later, though.
Whoa, man! I'm telling you, bury the lead on this. Get a limited edition holiday shave set while supplies last. Go to harrys.com/Doomsday, Doomsday. That's harrys.com/Doomsday. All right, Ed. Boy, happy holidays. Merry Christmas to you. And everybody who's been a part of this thing, Mark Friedman back in Dallas. We're all over the country, but Frito has us sounding good. And just hope you have a great rest of the holidays. And Ed, we'll talk to you. Let's see. This game occurs on New Year's Eve. So, Heck, why don't we just tape this thing on New Year's Day, if it's okay with you guys?
2018. What else is going on? Some good college football games, I guess. But, hey, we'll knock it out before that.
It sounds
we're more important than that.
I would say so.
Is more important than that.
Very, very. That is very much the case. All right. I want to say thanks to everybody. Hope you're having a great holiday. Good night, everybody.
Lights are shining, stockings have been hung. You're praying for your daughter, lighting candles for your son. They're living in the city now, you don't see them anymore. This year will not be like the ones before.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.